exclusive XM presentation.
Louis C.K. is about to get unmasked.
Unmasked. Truth in comedy.
Swimming through the inner soul of the comedic mind.
Unmasked. On XM Satellite Radio.
Uncensored conversation with America's most compelling comedic minds.
Unmasked.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Yeah. My other daughter's 4 years old. There's the person with a whole personality. She's a complete person. And let me tell you something about that kid. She's a fucking asshole. If you're with a group of people that are going somewhere, and a member of your party won't put their fucking shoes on, that person is a fucking asshole.
This is Unmasked with Louis C.K., an XM exclusive comedy presentation. Now, from Comics Comedy Club in New York City, here's host Ron Bennington.
Thank you. Welcome to Unmasked tonight. We've got a fantastic guest that we're all excited to talk to. He's been a director, a producer, a writer, and a stand-up comedian. Please welcome Mr. Louis C.K. Louis C.K.
Thank you.
Nice to see you here tonight. You're a guy, even as a little kid, you love comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The first comedy I was ever exposed to was Bill Cosby, and a friend of mine, Jeff Drew, who I grew up with, he had all of Cosby's records, and I think I was like in second and third grade, and we used to just sit and listen to Cosby just over and over again, just wearing out the vinyl.
He's so great that we've almost forgotten it, you know?
No, to me, the three titans, like, timeless, are Carlin and Cosby and Pryor. Those are the three guys that I learned about really quickly and loved, and to this day, they're exactly as funny.
And for some reason, though, with Cosby, people are like, well, he's so mainstream that somehow, like, maybe that's easier.
But as a stand-up, he was just incredibly good. Just really, really great. The timing.
And still is. I mean,
still is, yeah.
I saw him not too long ago on Letterman, and he came out and was just murdering. And he's, I guess, well into his 70s now.
Yeah, and I think people, I mean, I used to study him when I was a kid, and I still do. Like, every time I've done a special that was important to me, I go back and look at him because he had great technique and he was like a jazz musician, you know? Right. He's a guy, he would keep the microphone at his knee. Like, a lot of us, like, I came up with young 80s guys, and Kinnison was the big one when I started, so I'd eat the mic and scream into it, you know, and not let up. You know, and but he keeps the mic at his knee and talks at a normal voice, and then when he wants to, he does this. And he knows the power of the different ranges and stuff, so.
See, I would think that would be a little scary to look at other stand-ups before you did your special, because you don't want to pick up inflections or...
Well, I don't think it happens to me, because I'm looking at really the mechanics, like really the underlying, like, how are you using silence, and some of it is just inspiration, you know.
I think Chris Rock is another person who believes in watching public speakers, and you do that as well. And people forget that it is public speaking. So as a young person, as a kid, you're listening to this stuff, you're kind of studying it, and you said to yourself, this is what I want to do, or was that too far off of it?
No, I didn't know you could. I didn't know you could be something like that, a comedian. I didn't know that there was a road to it, but I really did want to. I mean, when I was in fourth grade, and we had the Gong Show was big on television then, so we had a Gong Show, and I did stand up. I told jokes. I juggled two balls and an apple and ate the apple, and then told bad jokes. That was my first time performing.
Yeah, and how did it feel to you? Was it?
I loved it. I completely loved it. And so I thought, God, Carlin and those guys, they're just talking in great circles. I don't know if I could do that. But when I saw Steve Martin, I thought, I'm weird inside my head like he is.
Well, were you funny with your buddies? Did all your buddies act like you're hysterical?
Yeah, somewhat. I was kind of this little dumpy fat kid. And I wasn't succeeding in anything as a kid. I didn't see anything that I would be really good at. I guess I made people laugh when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I remember a huge laugh I got I think it was like third grade or something, and the teacher was talking about the different parts of the skull. You know, the skull has like 2-3 bones in it. I don't remember what they are. And the teacher said, does anybody know the other one? And I said, the noggin. And they laughed a lot.
It's like the greatest thing to get those laughs in school, too, when you're not supposed to.
No, the first time I really killed, I was in 5th grade, and we did Free to Be You and Me, the hippie fucking liberal play.
Right.
And, which I didn't know at the time I was being used for hippie purposes, but, we had a really mean teacher who was really tough, and I grew to like her, but she would like the instant the kids were leaving, she'd light a cigarette. Like you always smelled cigarettes when you walked out of a room. She was so stressed out. So she made us do Free to Be You and Me, and she told me to do a poem called Don't Put Your Horse in a Nightgown. It's an absurd poem, and I had to stand in front of the curtain, like in vaudeville when somebody does a solo act, while they're setting something up, and do this poem, and I couldn't remember it. And every rehearsal, I'd start, don't put your, and she'd go, louder! And she'd scream at me and say, if you don't know this, you're going to look like an idiot, and you're going to ruin the play. And I was so scared, and I drilled it and tried to memorize it, and then I came out for the play, and I'm looking at everybody's parents and the whole school, and I took a breath to start talking, and I just started fucking laughing. And they laughed. And then I and I started laughing again. And I was up there for like 10 minutes just laughing. And the place was going nuts. It was like a huge, and I walked off, just huge applause. And I went backstage and all the other kids were, you ruined the show. You ruined it. You're awful. You stink. And nobody would talk to me for about a week after that.
So, was it tough being up there? Where you're like, hey, I'm getting laughs through my own personality?
I was high off my head, and I loved it. I felt bad when the kids hated me for it.
Sure.
There was part of me inside going, fuck you, little faggots. Fucking, I just killed. What did you do?
Yeah.
Pretending to be a baby and know everybody was yawning, asshole.
You know, nobody wants to see the other performer kill. It's always rough, even at a young age.
Yeah, nobody wants to follow that. Exactly.
So in school, were you the class clown? Were you the wise ass?
Not really. I had ADD a lot, I think, or I don't know. I don't think it's that simple. But I was just, I was a bad student, and I fell asleep a lot. I had low energy. I was kind of fat, sugar, low energy. And I remember being depressed a lot. So I wasn't that funny to other kids, I don't think.
Really?
Yeah.
But in the back of your mind, you said, I want to do this. How did you get up on stage the first time?
I was in high school, and I was listening to the radio, to WBCN in Boston, and they used to have 5 o'clock funnies. And so they had a guy on named Chance Langton, who was a comedian in Boston, and just a local, I didn't know there was local comedy. I thought it was just those huge guys with albums. And all of a sudden I'm listening to this guy who's really funny, and then they came on and said, that's Chance Langton, you can see him this weekend at whatever, at the Comedy Connection. And by the way, if you go to Stitches on Com Ave on Sunday nights, you can go on, anybody can go on. It was open mic night. Just show up and sign up. And so I started to try to think of 5 minutes. And I thought I had an hour of amazing material. Like, I literally thought, like, I've got so much shit, and I'm going to go up and blow them away, and I'm going to be a star tomorrow, like next week. Like, I'm making my plans. I don't have to do any homework. I mean, I'm going to be a huge star. Because I also pictured I'd be the only one, and I pictured all these like a guy with a cigar. Who's the new kid? You know, I'd be like, this is the kid, and all these grown-up comics would be like. But I get there's a line of really competent comedians who are just doing open mic night. Right. And there was a lot of competition. But I got on stage, and I did a minute and a half to total silence. Every single thing I did was a terrible idea. Just total. And also, I'm looking at a bunch of grown-ups drinking. These are like people in their 20s and 30s, like Boston fucking bar drunks. And I'm trying to make them laugh, and it was one of the worst things to date that's ever happened to me. Was the first time I ever went on stage, and I was so ashamed. And do
you remember any of the jokes or anything that you were doing?
Yeah, I can't. I remember all of it. I remember the whole set from front to back.
But it's kind of like I just asked you, hey, tell me about the time you were molested when you were
exactly. Oh, well, like you could just I was about 14, and my dad fucked me in the ass. I think it must have been fall, because it was, you know. I had the Red Sox win the playoffs, I remember, and I jizzed on my face.
I think it's good to have some scars that don't heal.
Absolutely.
The pain is still there.
To me, that's what started a pattern of my whole life, which is survival of failure. And I think if you can go to places and fail and come out intact, you've got a huge wealth of information.
Sure.
Bombing is much more instructive than when you kill. You just go, all right, look at me.
Yeah.
You don't learn anything. You don't even remember why you killed.
Yeah.
You just go, oh, it was great because I'm great. That's why.
Yeah.
But when you bomb, it's like a murder happened to you, and there you've got data, you got evidence. It's like forensics.
CSI now.
Yeah, you walk around poking things with a pencil and you go, well, if you hadn't said this after that, it wouldn't have gone so bad. And you learn, you have a huge wealth of information.
Yeah, it is really funny at that stage where you go back and go, I came out with the wrong attitude immediately, and then you don't have the skills to pick it back up.
Exactly.
You know? And when the audience sees the lack of confidence.
Oh, they just pounce with hatred. They were so mean too, and it was just awful. I mean, just with silence, I felt they were mean with silence. They didn't do it. They didn't make a noise. Nobody heckled, but I hated them. I felt really hateful towards the audience, and I tried it one more time. And I wasn't going to do it, but Kevin Meaney, who was the comic in Boston at the time, I worked at a video store, and he used to come in and rent videos, and so I got to know him, and I told him that I had tried stand-up, and he said, oh, you got to come do my show. And he had a show called the Sweeney Meaney Show, which was the biggest show in Boston. He said, you got to come on my show. And I said, oh, I've only done it once, and it was bad. Let me get good at it. And he goes, no, I want you now. Because it's comedy tragedy. I want to watch you bomb on my show. And I went and did his show, and it was packed, and people were so excited. And him and Sweeney did this "We Are the World" thing that it was just destroyed. And then they brought me on, and I equally, worsely bombed. And I can't describe how horrible that felt. And I was 18, and I knew I wasn't going to go to college, and so I'm like, well, I can't be a comedian. That's not going to work. Right. It was really depressing.
It is.
I didn't do stand-up for almost a year after the second time.
I mean, now, looking back on it, you would expect it, because it's almost like you put on some shoulder pads and a helmet and walked out with the Patriots.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I think I can play this.
Yeah, I can do this.
Have you ever played? No, I watched a lot, though. And I think I'm ready.
Exactly. And I was a kid. I was this, somehow I got skinny in those years of my life, so I was this weird skinny kid with a big head, looking nervous. I mean, the only thing worse than being me would have been watching me in the audience, I think. There's probably still people in those two audiences that, like, once in a while go, oh, God, that was that kid. That was awful. And they remember it as well as I do.
And then they'll see you on Letterman or something.
Yeah, they go, no, that's not the same guy. That's not the same guy.
That odd kid. But you came up with a good point. Like, any thinking person, any person that could learn would go, I can't do this. I won't go back.
Yeah.
What is it about you that said, I got to go back there?
I guess I looked back at the pain of it, and I thought, well, I did it. It hurt, but I survived it. Well, what really happened was like almost a year after the second time, I went to this place in Boston, and in Cambridge, really, this place in Central Square, the Cambridge kind of Harvard weird hippie area. They had a place called the Off the Wall Cinema, which showed old movies and weird movies. And I used to go there. And they had comedy night every Saturday at midnight. So I went to that, and it was a totally different crop of comedians. They were just weird. It was hosted by a guy named Ron Lynch, who's just a really strange, esoteric comic. And they were really offbeat, like Steve Martin was. And I thought, that I can do. So I begged him, I just went up to the host and said, please let me go on here. And he said, I only use, professionals. And I said, just please. I was, this kid just saying, I have to do this. And he said, you need to make a tape. I need to hear a tape. And I didn't want to go back to the stitches. So I got my friends to get in a room with me in a tape recorder. And they clinked glasses together so it sounded like a nightclub. And actually, I was so afraid to do it that my friend he did music, so he had a 2-track recorder, so I was in the room alone telling the jokes, and then afterwards they recorded, and I didn't let them listen to the jokes. I listened to my part and went laugh here. And I actually thought that and I gave it to Ron, and he listened, and then the next week I came back and he said, well, if you invite those idiots on tape to sit in the front row. But he put me on, and I started doing it, and I had a little success, little titters, little tiny laughs, and that was enough to me.
To keep feeding
trying
on that,
it. Yeah, because I liked it. To this day, I still go like, yeah, I'm not going to be good at that. Fuck it, let's try it.
You still, to this moment, like to stretch yourself. Because your career has taken you into some really strange places where I say most stand-ups wouldn't even think to make some of the moves that you've made as far as making films and, you know, writing for shows and other people. You're doing a lot of stuff throughout, you know, I guess in the early days that none of your peers were doing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Because I also was interested in making movies. So all the time I was doing stand-up, I used to make short videos and stuff like that.
So at the same time you had the stand-up fixation as a kid, you were into film stuff?
I really wanted to make movies. Woody Allen was one of my big heroes too, in both ways. He was a great stand-up, and he made me laugh so hard with his movies. I was like, if I could make people laugh that hard, like where they're just like losing their composure, I want to make that happen. So.
And another person like Cosby that has been so great for so long that no one recognizes him. And then he'll die and everyone will go, oh my God, he's my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Even though, you know, the new movie will open and you can go down and lay down and watch it and no one else will be in there with you. And these things are brilliant. I mean, he had a run of films for like 18 years that were just as good as any film that came out every year.
Yeah, and some of them the funniest.
Yeah.
You know, Bananas. I mean, that shit is bananas.
Yeah.
It's great. Take the money and run. It's just all so good.
So when you started making short films, did you feel like the same type of process? I can't exactly get to where I want to go?
Well, it was easier with that because there was... I'm good technically, like in I used to fix cars for a living, and so I started when I was in high school interning at a local access cable TV station, and I figured out how all the machines work and how to fix them. And really, the thing about access to video equipment is just they don't want you to break it, you know. And I used to fix it. So I used to take it home on the weekends, the stuff that they used to use to cover like high school basketball games, and I would shoot films and edit them. But that's something I've really always been into, photography and video and all that stuff. So that's where
and being able to figure out how to get the stuff, because it is sitting all over the country. You know, public TV stations, public access. This stuff just sits most of the time, and they'll shoot for a half an hour a day, and then that'll be the end of it.
You know, and at the time, it was not like a little video camera that you held in your hands. It was a huge package. It was a giant tape recorder, like up to your thighs, and then a massive camera with a big cable between them. That was the package. So I lugged that around. And when it came to trying to do stuff like that, I just had I had energy. I think that was what made me do this stuff, was that in school I would fall asleep all the time. I literally wanted to I used to think about killing myself when I was really little, because I was just I was just always dry-mouthed and tired. I was just uncomfortable. I wasn't personally unhappy. I had, great parents and a good family and even friends, but I was just physically exhausted, bored, and I'm like, I just want to kill myself. I mean, I'm only fucking 9 and this already stinks. And then...
the suicide note, I can't take the physical discomfort.
Yeah, this just feels shitty. And I didn't even have a real physical ailment. I just didn't like being in a human body or something. Just fundamentally. But so when I started doing, all of a sudden I'm dragging video equipment around in the hot sun and organizing, calling people and getting them to meet me somewhere, and then half of them don't show up and you have to rewrite it, and all of a sudden I found something I could get into. So I got into the video, and then at night later into the stand-up.
See, that's another interesting thing about you. I think that a lot of comics are like, I'm going to work on my act, and I'm going to wait for somebody to come along and say, this is what I've been looking for. And you're the type of guy, you will pick up the phone and sell yourself.
Yeah, well, and also I'll just do stuff. I'll do my own stuff. And when I was messing around with stand-up when I was 18 out of high school, and then during the day I was working like full-time, and I'd gotten a job at a local access cable TV station covering hockey games and stuff like that. And I realized this is going to be a long slog going through television to get to movies. And then I decided I'd rather do stand-up and let that take me to make a movie someday. I saw stand-up as a way to get to make films like Woody Allen did. That's what he did. He was just so funny that they gave him a camera. So I decided to try that way instead. I ended up going back and forth a lot.
So what took you to this point? Did you show up in New York with some of these tapes and your stand-up? Or?
Yeah, I had a bunch of short videos that I'd done, and I was doing stand-up and starting around the time I started comedy in 1985, and the comedy was huge then. And so by the time I did stand-up in Boston until like about 89, and so I was proficient and able to nail down a decent amount of minutes on stage at a time where anybody that could do that could get on television. It was just, there was this need for stand-ups, and they're just being thrown up on these awful brick wall shows.
Yeah, right.
Just, you can know how to tell a joke without peeing your pants, just get up there, just do a set. And so I was like, and all of a sudden I was on 20 TV shows, and they were all horrible, and I wasn't that funny, but I knew how to do it. So they let me, so anyway, that kind of got me to New York with the cable shows, and I had these videos of short films that I'd made. And there was a show on A&E called Caroline's Comedy Hour. Yeah. Colin Quinn was the host, and they wanted to do sketches one year. They wanted to actually have comedy sketches, so they kind of threw out, the word that they wanted writers, and I applied for it. I had videos, basically funny videos that I'd made, so they hired me. And for the writing staff, Jon Stewart was the head writer, and me and David Tell and Susie Essman were the writing staff for Colin. Yeah, so we all did these weird sketches that nobody ever really saw, but I got to, so that was my first writing credit. That was my first time being paid.
And did you guys at the time feel like we're all going to be big, or this is just a lucky deal?
Yeah, it was just something to try. I was really into it because I loved, again, sort of like being able to fix the equipment. I knew that I knew how to organize and shoot stuff. So I would pitch things, and even if people weren't crazy about the idea, I'd go, well, I know a place we can shoot this, and I know a guy, and I'll just give me a camera and I'll go and do it. So they let me. And none of those things were funny, but I tried.
And then, the beauty of what you're doing is, 99% of the other comics would rather sleep in and
most comics don't try. Yeah, most comedians do their 20 minutes to an hour a night, if that, and then they call their manager and go, why didn't you do something? What happened? What are you doing? And it's bizarre to me because stand-up, the odds of making it as a comedian are insanely low. It's the dumbest thing to do. I think I think actor is worse. But anyway, most comedians, the odds are so slim that why wouldn't you treat it like you're an Olympic athlete? Kids that want to be Olympic skaters, they get up at 4 a.m. so they can skate for 3 hours before school, and then they skate after school. It's crazy what they go through, and most of them don't get to skate in the Olympics. But most comedians literally smoke pot and don't do anything.
A lot of TV watching takes place by stand-up comics.
Most definitely.
And then they, come back later and try to tell people about it,
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happens.
It's their entire day. Then that night I saw this commercial, and they feel like they've created something.
And it's barely a conversation you'd want to just hear in a room, let alone pay money to fucking watch.
If you were watching that commercial, you'd be like, shut up, who cares?
There was a guy in Boston when I started who used to talk about the Jetsons. And he used to do a bit about how, isn't it funny how all George does is push a button and he's exhausted. But that's, the Jetsons writers wrote that joke. It's not like he's making an observation, but that's the point of the whole fucking show. Is that in the future we'll have these conveniences and we'll still bitch about them. It was a huge joke that went on and on the Jetsons. And he's going like, hey, did you ever notice? As if the Jetsons writers would go, shit, we are making him kind of tired for pushing a button. That guy's he's really got a...
That's great. So where did you go from the Carolines show?
Then I just did stand-up all over the country. I didn't get another job after that. And although one of the guys who shot Caroline's, one of the cameramen, excuse me, he was a camera. He had a 16mm camera, and I met him. And so the idea of making a film, like a movie film, was really exciting to me. And I talked to him, and I asked, is that impossible to make a movie? And he goes, no, I have a camera, and you buy film, and you run it through. And that's it. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, and I know a guy who has a tape recorder, so he'll make sure you can hear it. And it's that simple. So I wrote a short film, and I made it. And that was a big step for me. I'd never made, that was my first time directing like a film that I wrote. And he did it for me for almost free, and we hired a crew of people, and I used all comedians in it. And it was the first time I met Rick Shapiro, who's on my show. Lucky Louie, he was in that. And Ray Romano's in that too, and a bunch of guys. But anyway, so that was and I started making it, I had only a few $100s, and I ran out of money, and I called my mom, and because I never went to college, my mom said, I'll help you finance this movie. This will be like your college tuition. I mean, it was only $10,000. She got off pretty cheap. Yeah. But I made it and sent it to festivals. Got a couple of little awards and stuff. That's when I really started making films. And
showing up, even with a short film at a film festival, is a much different thing than I'm a stand-up coming into, let's say Houston to do a week there. Suddenly people look at you differently, right?
Yeah, and so I had all that. I mean, I was doing really awful gigs around the country. Also, comedy was starting to die. It was the late '80s, and clubs were closing everywhere. So I was working clubs for no money, for no audience. Literally, you'd go to a comedy club, there'd be 12 people on stage. Like the Comedy Cellar here in New York, there would be no audience, and they'd make you go on stage to literally an empty room, and you had to stand on there and tell jokes. Because the owner's feeling was if somebody sticks their head in and there's no show, then you got to prime the pump. So I've actually did a bunch of shows at the Comedy Cellar, not even a waitress. But I had to tell the jokes.
Okay, somebody looks in the window.
Yeah.
Keep the room dark
going on. Yeah. So I did that, and then I was doing this film stuff. And then I made a film called Ice Cream, which was really simple and black and white. And that one went to Sundance, and it won a grand prize at Aspen and a bunch of... That one just really blew up and did great. And then the Conan show started in '93, and they, same as Caroline's, just threw the net out who's funny and who can write. And I had these short films that were like bona fide, good, well-made comedy shorts.
Now, how many people were on that writing staff?
I think there were 6 of us on the first staff. And this was before the show was on the air. This was like, the show came out in September, and I got hired like in May.
That's almost shocking to me, because to follow Letterman, and there was all the controversy about Letterman has jumped, you would have thought that the network would have thought, we need huge writing staff to take care of this kid.
Right.
And make sure this thing works out. It's your first real national gig, and there's only 5 other guys on the staff. It
was a small staff.
Yeah.
It was a great staff. But for me, it was the biggest thing that ever happened, because I was dying. The films, I'd done them, and then and that was over. And stand-up was I really wasn't making the rent. And my mom had no more money, so she never had any money. But I was going to give up, and as Saturday Night Live auditioned people for a new cast first, and they hired every one of my friends, Dave Attell, Laura Keitlinger, Janine Garofalo, who we started together in Boston. Everybody. Jay Moore was this young kid. He got hired. Like everybody I knew got hired except for me.
On that same stand-up show?
Either as a writer or as a performer on SNL, and I got nothing. And so I called my friend who was living in San Francisco, and I said, maybe I'll move there because it's nice there and just do something else. Like I had decided to quit show business. It's the only time I actually made that hard decision, like, I'm quitting. This stinks.
Oh, because 5 out of 6 people go on to have a great job.
Yeah, and I wasn't making a living. So I wasn't making a living doing stand-up, and I didn't get a TV job, and I was really down. And I had decided, like, at 3 a.m. one night to quit. And the next morning, I got this call from this guy who said, hi, my name's Robert Smigel, and I'm running Conan. I don't know if you heard. I hadn't heard about Conan. I'm like, who's Conan? And he said, we're replacing Letterman. I'm like, what's Letterman? What happened to Letterman? I didn't even know. I didn't even know that he was going off the air. And he looked at my short films and hired me and completely saved my life.
Wow, that's a crazy story.
Yeah.
You're about how old now?
I was 24, I think, 25.
Wow. So again, even though you're like, things aren't working out, you've already done short films, have been in festivals, you're doing stand-up, you've been on TV, and yet you still feel like a failure
Yes.
At this point.
And also, again, the default for me, once there's nothing going on and nothing to do, I'm back to being this guy in this body that I hate.
Right, that you despise.
Feeling bad. Walking in the hot sun, there's a stitch in my side, and I can't drink anything that really makes me feel better.
You really need to stay busy at all times.
Exactly.
So here you're 24 years old, and you're at 30 Rock. This is real show business now.
Shit, yeah, it was huge. And I never got used to going in that building, 30 Rock. Every time I went in, I'm like, I can't believe how cool this is. I worked there for 2 years, and every day that I went in the building, I was just like, this is, I felt like Mary Tyler Moore is spinning around.
Right. And the show, and people forget this now because Conan's such a huge star. He took a lot of heat when that show started.
Yeah, people hated him, and and that was another thing that I learned from surviving failure was watching him take just shots to the head and having no retort because he didn't earn the show.
Right. They hated him because they didn't know him.
Yeah, and he never performed. Like, literally, his first professional performing job was the fucking Conan O'Brien show. And so, he couldn't even go, yeah, well, fuck you. He had to go, I know, well, I'm trying, though, please. But he just stuck to it. And there was so many days, so many Fridays, where everybody was calling their agents, where we were told definitively, this is the end of the line. And Conan would take off his jacket and take a deep breath, and he'd get on the phone with the network. And he just somehow would go, guys, I just know we can get some traction. He defended. He
never had a contract, right? It was a week-to-week deal?
Yeah, no, he could have been fired any minute. And they kept saying, I remember one day Rick Ludwin, who was the big late-night chief, said to us, one day he came in and said, guys, these Sandinistas are climbing over the walls. And I'm going to just drop my gun and run. I can't do it. And so we were all like, well, it's over. And that went on for like 2 years, it felt like that. To the point where sometimes we were like, couldn't you fucking cancel the show? Like, I wanted it to get canceled because it was so tense. But Conan stuck to it. And also, we were writing for him really hard to sell, weird, fucked up bits that a lot of them bombed, and this poor dude would just sit there with sweat trickling down his neck, and he'd do them, and he would never bail on a bit. He just I really learned to respect him from that.
So he's a real tough guy in terms of being able to just wait this thing out.
Yeah, nothing can hurt Conan. He's a very strong guy.
And you're talking to Smigel's on the writing staff, and is that where you really learned about comedy?
Yeah, that's how I learned about comedy writing.
Yeah.
And putting together comedy for television and how to put it, how to make it work for an audience and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I think that's something most comics don't try too, is to write for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you come across as how to write for someone with a totally different personality than my own?
Well, we were doing comedy sketches on that show, so I didn't write his monologue. I didn't have anything to do with that, but we would write. It was like making little movies or stage plays. Because the great thing about Conan or any talk show is that some of the stuff takes place in front of an audience. So we got to try these two things. Some of them were film bits that you'd go out and shoot and produce with characters and stuff, and other ones were bringing characters into the audience and learning how to work a script and cue cards with an audience there and stuff. I mean, an amazing experience.
Especially for someone with no experience doing this.
Nothing. And the other guys, one of them was Dino Stamatopoulos, who's now doing a show called Moral Oral. That's a great show. And just a bunch of guys. Everybody's gone on to do different things. But
do you think that show is what gave you the credibility to move in some of the other places you went?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Robert and Conan were really generous. And if it was funny, you got to run your bit. If you wrote something funny, they'd go, okay, go do it. And you'd literally get to cast it and direct it. And when I was 24, and if it was my bit, I would direct Conan. I'd sit on the couch next to him going, here's what you do, and I'd just boss him around. And he let me do that because if you were funny, they wanted you to run it. They trusted you. So I got a huge amount of experience and then credibility because people started to know I was doing these bits. I was also the first one to do stand-up on the show because they just said, come downstairs and do a set. Like, it was just come down, eat your lunch, come down and do a set. So I got to perform on the show and do stand-up on the show.
So you never abandoned the stand-up thing as you're writing?
No, I used to actually run out of it because the writing sessions would go to 3 a.m. And sometimes I would say, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'd go to a comedy club and come back. I did that a lot because I've never stopped doing stand-up because it's saved my life every time that I've bottomed out.
So why ever leave that show? Why not? Why aren't you still there? It seems like a great gig.
Yes, it is, but it's 5 nights a week. It's really hard. And actually, when Robert left, they asked me to take over and be the head writer. And at that point, I was 26, and that was pretty amazing. But I didn't want to do it because it felt like a job. Mm-hmm. It felt like a real job, and I was really burnt. 5 nights a week is really hard to do.
At a certain point in your career, because I know you brought up the Pryor thing, and I think he's the first comic for me that started working from a place of truth, whether or not it happened to be funny. Mm-hmm. At a certain point in your career, you accepted that as well, or decided to go in that direction. Do you know exactly when that happened, or was it gradual?
Yeah, no, it kind of happened all at once for me because I did a half hour for HBO. The first one I did was like in 95, and it was fine. Like, I was weird and silly, and I got laughs, but nobody cared, and neither did I. And then I did one for Comedy Central, which was the next half hour, which I had written of just more dejevers and, you know, making weird noises and stomping around and stuff. And I did it, and I was like, I started to feel like I was going in circles. I didn't like my act at all. And I didn't feel like I was getting better anymore. I was just spiraling into the ground. And oh no, this is supposed to be about how it got good. But after the last Comedy Central half hour that I did, I was out of material. I had no more jokes. It had all been on the specials, and so I kind of had a clean slate. And all of a sudden, I'd kind of grown up all at once. I had kids and all these high stakes in my life, and I was really scared of life. Not just show business, actual life. So all of a sudden I'm this real person. So I started writing from that point. You know what happened? I started saying stuff on stage because I expected not to get laughs. I would just be on stage somewhere really frustrated and having a hard time with my kids and my wife at home, and I would just say stuff that I expected to get boos, and then that'll be the end of it. I mean, the first time I said on stage was like kind of one joke that changed it all. That I said, my wife and I had sex, which is amazing because we never have sex because we have a baby and our baby's a fucking asshole. And I said that the first time, and I thought people would. I just said something I said because I'm like, fuck you, I'm on stage, I'll say what I want, and I'll do a funny joke, and they'll forget it. And I did that, and I got this huge laugh, and I was like, weird. And then the next night, I think I said the second joke of that I was just building from that one was, now I understand the babies in the garbage thing. I didn't used to. I used to go, well, how could you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I get it. So, and that got a huge laugh. But what I found that was really made me pay the most attention to this was that it wasn't just kind of young people or nihilist fuck-ups laughing. It was like this crowd. But it was like I was in Columbus, Ohio, and like a soccer mom came up to me and said, I love the babies in the garbage thing. That's my favorite thing ever. And I realized that normal people, regular folks who I never connected with on stage, totally want to hear this. And so this shit started coming out of me that was just, and I decided I'm not going to come up with jokes anymore. I'm not going to try to think of funny things to say. I'm going to say the things that are gnawing in my head. Any thought that I've been having a lot, I'm just going to say it.
And you're not going to edit yourself.
Not at all.
It's out there.
And all of a sudden a huge amount of lifelong fear was just gone. And I just didn't care. Even if sometimes I'd get like, whoa, from the crowd, I just didn't matter. It didn't mean anything to me. I just, and I get away with it for some reason. Some of it is just because I'm very convicted about it. And when I say my baby's an asshole, and people go, oh, and I go, fuck you, you don't know my baby, you don't know this guy. And I just felt impervious to criticism. Because I wasn't making jokes, I was just talking, I was just saying how I felt for once. And so that was huge for me.
And so that changed things for you. I guess the fear of that, the other side of that, is that you're saying stuff to the audience as if it was your shrink or whatever.
Yeah.
But we all know that there is a possibility that one day someone will say, to their shrink.
Yeah.
When I was a baby, my dad thought I was an asshole. And that he understands throwing babies in the garbage.
Right.
So you really are now, I think the thing about your act that's so exciting is that we know it's a risky proposition what
Yeah.
you're doing socially.
Yeah, and I do have 2 little girls, and I love them very much. And I think there will come a day when one of them says, why did you say that shit about me? And I'm ready for that question.
Right.
Because I had a good reason to say it. Because, you know, I'm not trying to be, like, if I said to her, like, come on, honey, I'm making jokes because they paid me. That would be hard to, you know, like, so then it would mean I said shit about her for no good reason,
right.
just to be selfish. But I'm going to tell her I was fucking really tired, and you wouldn't let me fuck my wife. And I was a young man trying to get my head around raising you. It was really, really hard. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Any 2-year-old would be a fucking asshole in a situation like that. But, no, I'm ready for that.
Yeah, and I'm sure by the time you get to this conversation, there's going to be 25 years of material.
Oh, yeah.
And
No,
then you
it's
said
still,
my boyfriend.
No, I'm on my new hour now, and it's still about the kids.
Yeah.
Now it's about the 3-year-old, because the 6-year-old, who I really wrote the first stuff about, is just awesome. She's a great friend of mine, so I no longer have jokes about her, because she's actually like a support. She's like a big sister to me, that kid. So I gotta depend on her. And I'm a good dad. I'm with them. If I was like, you know, a lot of showbiz legends, comedy legends who were like funny clowns, and then at home they're like fucking literally hitting their kids with a glass of whiskey, you know.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily mean Jerry Lewis when you say that.
No. Or what's the Cowardly Lion I heard was pretty awful.
Bert Lauer.
Yeah, he was a lot of people like that. But I'm with my kids every day, and I'm you know, I take them to school. I don't have a nanny or anything, so
that was a great generation too, because they would do family specials, and then they would get home and yell, "Stay away from Daddy."
Yeah.
You know, they would just have their own room in those days with their pills and everything.
Yep. So, and you know, what I believe too is that if you are a relaxed father, if you're like, oh, my kids are great, we have a great time, you don't spend any time with them. You're a bullshitter.
Right.
If you really are raising your kids, you want to fucking kill them every day. And you want to kill everybody else just for standing near them and being people.
Well, it's another impossible situation, just like you talked about stand-up. When you're a father, you never get it right, as hard as you try.
No,
the guy
it's
who
impossible.
Says, the guy who says, I'm a great dad, is not paying attention. It's like the guy who says, I'm a great comic. You know,
and it's a very frustrating job, and what I found that the reason it was succeeding is because parents, everything about families is supposed to be polite and Christian and sweet. Every family show about a family is harmony, because that's what people think that you're supposed to do on television, what you aspire life to be like. So all the kids are funny, and the parents kind of get a little, oh, this is tough.
Yeah.
But it's great. Everything's great. And it's just not the fucking truth. And when I had kids and realized I probably have like a good family as families go, and it stinks. And I realized it stinks for everybody. And, you know, I'd hang out with other parents, and I'd find out none of us are fucking. Nobody's fucking anybody. Because I thought it was just me and my wife that weren't fucking, and I'd meet other parents like, oh, yes, we still very romantic. And they'd say that, and I'd go, oh, really? And then but then you pull them apart, and you go to the guy, seriously? No, I haven't fucked her in years. Nobody's fucking. Nobody's fucking. There's nothing harder than being a parent. There's no guidelines. The stakes are enormous. You might be making Hitler. Like, there's no higher stakes than that. And there's no support. Everyone's just like, it's the parents. If they would just raise, even fucking Barack Obama is like, well, fuck you. You know, the fathers, they're the ones. Fuck you. You don't know all those stories.
And that always
until you find out why every single deadbeat dad walked away.
Right. And that gets applause, though. Like, if somebody will go, it starts in the home on Oprah, everybody claps along, like, and it's a mass lie.
Yeah, and then they go home and don't talk to each other. And no, it's miserable. So what I found out is that, but then parents have to be polite about it. You can't even say it's hard. You have to just say, oh, I love my kids are great. I used to do a joke where I'd say people will say I can't imagine my life without my children. That's all I do is imagine my life without my children. But so I found that parents who love their kids and who are really invested in their families would come to my show and just be so relieved to be allowed to have these thoughts. Because, and cursing while talking about kids was an important thing to do. Because when some young alternative comedy punk or whatever, or some kind of, chain smoking, tough guy, fuck the world comic, when they say fuck, I just don't give a shit. Because the dude's got an apartment and a motorcycle. I don't care. But when a father with a fucking stroller and a wife, and, couple of kids running around, when he goes, fuck! That's coming from somewhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? That dude has earned the right to curse all that he wants.
Well, we brought...
And the mother, too.
Yeah,
the mother.
We brought up this stuff about people not thinking they're doing good, and a big part of that is from TV. When you grow up, you go, my family's not as happy as the Brady Bunch or the Waltons or something. And then a show came on HBO called Lucky Louie that really showed a family who, talked the way you did. Yeah. And people got a little bit upset about it.
Yep.
And I was watching The View when you were a guest on The View, and Barbara Walters, before she brung you out, basically called you the Antichrist. Yeah. Then brought you out with the ladies.
Yep. That was an amazing day. Yes.
And all those women raised kids, right? At some point, I think.
I don't know. I don't know that they did.
Yeah, some. Well, I think about half of them did.
Yeah.
But why do you think? Was she being like, okay, I'm above it, or do you really think that she was appalled by the way you were showing family life?
Well, it was weird because when Lucky Louie was coming out and I was promoting it, I asked to do The View because I'd been on before on Joy Behar's Joy's Comedy Corner.
Sure.
And they had asked me to do it the first time, and I said, no, that's not my they're not going to like me. That's not my audience. They're old ladies. And the dude, the producer, I remember he just said, well, you live in New York City. What are you doing tomorrow at 1? Like, are you that busy? You can't just take a town car here and be on television? And I was like, oh, that's true, I could do that. So I just showed up, and Joy Behar is an old friend of mine. I know her, so I'm sitting with her, and I was killing. It was one of the best TV sets I'd ever had, because the audience at The View is they're just there to have fun. They're just positive. So when I started promoting Lucky Louie, I said, get me on The View. I want to be on that show. And also because, to me, that's part of the audience for Lucky Louie. And everywhere I go, by the way, old ladies come up to me and say how much they love the show. That's like one of the biggest demographics who likes the show. Because they're just, oh, you bad boy. Like, they just like, So I said, get me on, and they got me on, and I got a call from the producer who said, oh, the ladies love you, and they're excited to have you here, and they have all watched the show. Like, it's going to be great. And they gave me funny stories. They asked me to give them funny stories to tell on panel, and they were going to prompt me for funny stories. So I gave them all my funny stories, and then I showed up, and the other guest was Fonzie, Henry Winkler. And I mean, for me, it was just being there, I was like, Barbara Walters, I grew up, and she was like Barbara Wawa, and she was, the center of so much going on, and Arafat and all this stuff, and then Fonzie. I mean, Jesus Christ. I was in, like 4th grade, 3rd grade, when Fonzie was just the fucking king of the world to me. So here he is, weird, not at all Fonzie. Hi. It's not Fonzie. Oh, hi. Oh, that's nice. Like, it's not how Fonzie talks. And, but he's a great guy. Yeah. And he knows Pamela Adlon, who played my wife on Lucky Louie. So he actually came over to my dressing room to say, oh, I love Pamela, and I love the show. It's dear. Your show is dear. That's what he said. It's so dear. And that was great. And then And then all of a sudden, a producer comes in my room and says, I have to talk to you. They're about to go on the air. You need to see this. And her hand was shaking on this remote. She turned on the TV on this is it's on live. And there's Barbara Walters saying, our first topic is about one of our guests who has a show called Lucky Louie. And this is the most offensive, racist, sexist, terrible show I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe this is on the air. I hate it. And they all started going to town on that. There's pictures of me and stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I got to go out there. Yeah. And so she said, so we still want to try to do your funny stories. I'm like, no, I can't do the funny stories. You're fucking killing me out there. And I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. I think I called Chris Rock, who's like an advisor to me, and I told him
backstage.
I was backstage, and I called Chris Rock and said,
"This was the best show ever, by the way."
Yeah, it was great. And I said, "I don't know what to do. These women just shit all over me, and I'm about to go out there." And he said, "Don't forget the women. You've got people who are watching at home. Just rise above it and talk to the audience." Fuck Barbara Walters. She doesn't matter. You're going to be on television right now. Nobody's even going to notice what show it is. They're just going to see you. And that was a wake me up. I went out there and I thought, I'm not talking to Barbara Walters. Her audience is more important than she is to me. And I love those ladies. And I know they'll like me. And also they showed a clip, right before they brought me out, they showed a clip from the show of me and my wife arguing about money in bed. Which is, to me, what marriage is. Arguing about money instead of fucking. And the clip really worked. And the audience laughed, and I thought, fuck her, I don't need her. And I went out there, and she made a big deal out of, Barbara Walters came over and hugged me when I first walked out. Like, we're friends now. Like, the rift is over. And when she did that, I realized, this is pure bullshit. She doesn't dislike the show. She wasn't offended. She's trying to get on the map. She's trying to make it into something. And also the Republican, I forget her name, on the other side, said something about this show has touched off a firestorm of controversy. We were on the air for like a week. It hadn't touched off anything. There was nothing. They were trying to, let's touch off this firestorm of controversy right now. So then I realized that it's all false. Nobody was really mad at me. And then I just explained the show to the audience. I knew they wanted me to come out and go, fuck you. That's what they wanted. That's why they sandbagged me, because they hoped I would misbehave. They thought I would come on and say, fuck you, you old bag. And she'd go, oh my goodness. And it would be all over the place. But instead I came out and said, listen, I thank you for bringing up these concerns, because I don't want people to think the show's here to offend anyone. It's just honest. And I went through the points of the show and why it was important to me.
The funniest people on the planet to me think that you're funny. You're doing the new Gervais movie, Chris Rock, you brought up Robert Schrimmel, you're one of the comics on O&A that they'll have back in. Really the funniest people will say to you, come on and do this. I want you part of this project. Are you getting that? Does that...
it's really nice. I mean, to me, for me, the experience I'm getting... I mean, I'm amazed that anybody gives a shit. Right. Because I never, to me, reflects on me. I never feel, I never get evidence that makes me go, oh, I'm a different guy now. Yeah. I'm a better person now. Because everybody's saying, because people like me more and people come to my shows. I'm still the guy in the bad skin. I'm still the fucking uncomfortable dude. So it's just weird to me that people give a shit about what I do. It makes me really happy. But it doesn't make me think higher of myself. Right. Because I know me. And I've still got a little glazed cum from 10 minutes before this show. So I know what a piece of shit I really am. I know what I was jerking off to, and I'm not going to tell you. There are some truths I won't say on stage. But for me, the experience from that is getting to work with really great guys. I mean, Jesus. I mean, Chris I kind of knew coming up. We were kind of coming up at the same time, so he was more of a contemporary, but I'm in awe of him, and the fact that he keeps giving me break after break has been great. And Ricky, I mean, I watched his show, The Office, the English one, and I just loved it so much, and I always thought I'll never get to be part of something like that. And then when I got this call that he watches me on YouTube from England and loves my stand-up, and he made me his best friend in the movie that he wrote and directed. And it's just the greatest thing I ever got to do. And we shot it, and it was exactly as great as I thought it would be. I pray that I didn't ruin that movie, that it's good, because I don't think I'm a good actor. But, everybody. I've gotten to work with people that I've loved.
Well, I mean, what I guess I'm trying to say is that anybody could hopefully luck out and get some $150 million movie.
Yeah.
But for funny people to actually say, I love that guy, that's up and above it all.
Yeah, that feels good.
I want to take the opportunity, too, to take some questions over here. Would you answer some questions from the audience and give them a shot?
What do you think the chances would be of Showtime picking up Lucky Louie?
Well, they can't because HBO owns it.
Rename it.
And HBO would never... It would be one thing if we made it with a studio who then sold it to HBO, but it was made by HBO Studios, so they would never sell it to the most direct possible competitor they've ever had. So that'll never happen. The Lucky Louie's dead.
We had a question from the devil.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, you had mentioned titans of stand-up comedians, and I wanted to know if, are we getting exposed to more really good quality stand-up comedians because of YouTube, because of Comedy Central and satellite radio? Are we entering another golden age with guys like you and Norton and Patrice, or is it just that we're getting exposed to it more often and some of the crap's getting filtered out as opposed to the brick wall TV shows you spoke about in the 80s and 90s?
And you know what really changed it for me was seeing Chris Rock do his first big hour. Chris, I knew him as a stand-up here in New York, and then he was a kind of a cocky kid, and he had, Jerry curls, and he threw the mic down at the end of every show. Right. There was something kind of like silly about him, but he was smart, and I liked him. He was a nice kid. And then he went and did SNL and flailed and failed, and it was just bad. And even his friends thought so. And then he disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to Chris for a few years. Like, I kind of thought he quit. And then me and some friends found out he was at Caroline's headlining. And none of us had ever seen Chris do an hour. And all this time he was out on the road just working fucking awful clubs and pounding together material, like working on comedy material as if it mattered, like as if it was like a novel. And nobody was doing that. Yeah. Everyone was just fucking off with their shitty jokes and then waiting for their managers to do everything. So Chris, we all sat in the back, me and like 4 of the 5 other comics, and he just annihilated and set a bar so much higher than any of us even considered was possible. And we were all really depressed afterwards. Sure. Like, the audience was standing and applauding, and we were in the back just going, oh, fuck. Yeah. I could never do that. Yeah. I could never do that. So whenever that happens, whenever there's a new pace car that goes faster, everybody kind of comes up. You have to at that point. Yeah. So what the real goal is to just keep taking the stand-up higher and higher. Yeah. Well, and movies someday, but Pootie Tang kind of put the kibosh on that. so mostly it's the stand-up now.
Everyone, put your hands together, Mr. Louis C.K. Louis C.K. Thanks so much.
Unmasked on XM. Truth in comedy.
Unmasked. Swimming through the inner soul of the comedic mind.
This XM exclusive comedy presentation was recorded at Comics Comedy Club in New York City.
With thanks to Michael O'Brien, Brina Grossman, and Matt Kelly at Central Talent Booking, plus Jamie Carp, Megan Boja, and James Anton. Unmasked with Louis C.K. was hosted by Ron Bennington, recorded by Rob McCumber, assisted by Jeff Rothman, editing by William E. Black, post-production by Aaron Lee, executive producer Kenny Curtis.
Unmasked is produced exclusively by XM Satellite Radio.